Mood boards. What are they and how can they help you in logo design? Hey guys, my name's Ollie, and in today's video I'm going to run through an important part of the branding process, which is mood boards. I'll go through exactly how I create my own mood boards, how I try to capture my client's vision, and I'll show a few tips and tricks along the way to hopefully help you with your workflow. So without further ado, let's get going. So first off, what is a mood board and how can it help us in logo design? So a mood board for me is basically sort of setting the tone of voice that you are planning to go down for creating the logos for the branding project that you're working on with the client. So ideally we're looking for things like imagery, typography, iconography, things like this, and you bring it all together to try to create a tone of voice within a mood board which you present to the client, and they can then get more of an understanding of your direction before getting into the logo concepts. And this for me is a really important step because it allows you to then be focused more on a specific direction that you know both yourself and the client have already approved on, which just helps with narrowing down a ultimately signed off logo concept, which is at the end of the day what we're all hoping for when working with clients. So if you're wondering about where this sits within the overall process of creating a logo, here's a list of the step-by-step that I tend to do when working with clients. So to begin with, we have the client inquiry, whether that's through my website or through one of my social platforms. And from there, I like to jump onto a discovery call to fully get an understanding of what it is that the project is all about and how I can help. I then send over a brand proposal for the client, as well as a 50% deposit and a design brief for them to fill out. Once the documentation has been sent back, I begin the brand strategy. And within that comes the mood boarding, which I'm showing you today. After we have approval on the mood board, I then jump into the design process. Once we have a concept to show, it's then time for the brand presentation where I go through my logo idea. If that goes well, then it's the final step where I package together all of the assets and the branding documentation and send it over to the client. So that's my process. Obviously, everyone does things slightly differently. If you feel the need to take some inspiration, then please go ahead. But this is all about mood boards. So let's dive into creating a mood board for a real client that I'm actually working with at the moment. So this is a template that I've created that I use for every time that I need to create a mood board for a client. It just helps speed up the process massively if you have your own templates and stuff like that. So if you would like to use this, there's going to be a link in my description for you to be able to head to my website and download it. But to start off, obviously what we have here is just the introduction to it. So we go through the mood board presentation. The client name is CPG, which is short for Cultural Partnership Group. And let me tell you a little bit about them. So they are a government-funded organisation which basically helps bring together different small independent agencies and creatives and bring them all together through workshops and events just to help bring more of a collaboration within the community. Yeah, so we have the initial introduction and then we've got the index. And then the next step that we have here will be the competitor analysis. So speaking with the client, there wasn't an awful lot of competitors out there. At the end of the day, like I said, it's just a government funded, council run organisation. But I did find one that was kind of similar, and that was called the Bradford Arts Centre, which it's not exactly the same business, but they've got quite a nice branding. And I in fact managed to find actually the agency that created the branding. So this is great. So now I can grab a bunch of assets here that I can now throw into my mood board to then present to the client. So all I'm going to do now, I'm just going to reduce the size of this window, and then it's simply, I'm just going to screenshot a bunch of the different imagery and stuff that's on this website and just throw those into my Illustrator file, just so we can get a bunch of different assets that we can then throw into the comparator analysis. So yeah, as you can see, it's just a bunch of different imagery and stuff that has already been presented for the Bradford Arts Centre, but we're just going to put these into our competitor analysis, and then we will then write about what we see in terms of how the imagery is, what the typography is like, the color schemes that they're using, and the overall tone of voice that they're trying to push to the public. For this section, all I do is simply put this over one of my grey boxes that I've got here. I can now use the keyboard shortcut Command Shift and back bracket, which will send it to the back. I then grab the image and the square together and then press Command 7 to mask that. And that's basically all we're going to do for this whole section. So I'll quickly run through this and then I'll be back in a second. Okay, cool. So this is all of the images that I've now added in for the comparative analysis. And what I'll now do is sort of run through the 4 key points that I tend to sort of want to bring up, which is normally the typography, the imagery, the color, sort of lifestyle. And all this is just basically trying to explain the tone of voice that this competitor is trying to portray to its audience and stuff like that. I'm not going to do that now, that I'll do that more in my spare time, but I just want to tell you sort of this is what I would then do. But let's jump into creating our own mood boards for this client. Now, in terms of the amount of mood board options that you want to give to your client, that's entirely up to you. I tend to try to stick between 1 and 3. That's just because if you start to give them too many options, then things start to get a little bit confusing. The whole idea of a mood board is to hopefully give better direction. So you don't want to be overwhelming the client by just having too many options for them to choose from. So as I mentioned before I begin with a mood board, it's always so important to get your client to fill out a design brief, as that's going to be where you can find those keywords that you can then research. So I already have my design brief that my client has filled out for me, and from that I've got some great keywords to be searching for. The main ones that stood out for me were things like transformative, fluid, interconnection, fresh, collaborative. So in my mind, I already have some visual ideas that I think will work well for this sort of client. So now a good topic is obviously, where do you research? And obviously there's the big ones, Behance, Pinterest, but one of the ones that I found recently and I love is something called Cosmo. And this for me has been an absolute game changer because there is just so much content that you can find from this. So I've split my screen in two now, with Illustrator on the left and then the websites that I'm going to use on the right. So let's search for fluid typography and just see what sort of inspiration comes up. So yeah, this one's quite a cool one. Like I said, I quite like the idea of like fluidity and movement within text and stuff like that. So I'm going to drag this one in. This one's quite cool, again focusing on sort of movement and stuff like that. And this is basically all I do. It will just be searching a lot of the key terms and stuff like that, and then just dragging them all in. And then once they're inside Illustrator, I can then section them and try to come up with a mood board and that feels cohesive. Quite like the idea of having the word mark feel like it's connected. That's one of the key words that came from the brief, is connection. So if we could find a way to have this logo connected together, and I think that can work because obviously we've got the CPG as the word mark that we need to create here, and that's obviously 3 very rounded letters that we're going to be joining together. So in my head, that's sort of what I'm thinking, and I want to be able to find inspiration that I can then put forward for the client. So I'm just going to carry on searching and researching through some of the keywords and stuff that I've been given, and I will get back to you once I've got some inspiration in Illustrator. Okay, so I have a bunch of assets now that I've brought into Illustrator. So the next thing I need to do is organize them down into 2 mood boards. So as you can see, I have a bunch of different elements here. I've got quite a lot of marketing material. I've got icons, typography. I've got some word marks, And the whole idea here is that I'm just going to consolidate these down and try to create a mood board that has a mixture of elements that will hopefully visualize for the client the ideas that I have for the potential logo. So for my first mood board, I want there to have this real emphasis on fluidity and movement. So as you can see here, I've got some nice sort of like illustrations and icons and stuff like that just have this sort of like liquid style movement. And I just think that could be a good direction to potentially go down. So I'm just going to run through all of these elements and try to put them all to one side that I can use for my first mood board. Okay, cool. So I have this collection of different elements and stuff that I think I can sort of blend together to work quite well for the vision I have in my head for this mood board. The only thing that's missing is a little bit more imagery. So I know that this client is going to need to use quite a lot of imagery and stuff showing the community and stuff like that, but instead of it feeling so corporate, I was hoping for maybe something that's a little bit more dynamic in terms of the type of imagery that they're using. So to do that, I'm going to use a website called Unsplash, and this is amazing. This is a bunch of free assets and stuff like that if anyone's never heard of these before. And I'm just going to search dynamic to see what type of imagery can come up. Now I know I want the image to still show a person, but I don't want it to just feel like a corporate portrait for, visual. I want it to feel a little bit more dynamic. So yeah, I mean, something like this would be great. It's just given a little bit more of a youthful appearance as opposed to the sort of corporate visual that I know they're trying to steer clear of. Okay, cool. So now let's put this all together and bring it into our first mood board. So for my mood board here, obviously I only have 9 squares. So again, now that we have this section here, I'm going to narrow this down to try to consolidate these just a little bit further. So I think for this mood board, I want to go for more of a minimal tone in terms of color schemes. So I'm thinking we go for sort of black and white predominantly, and then just a burst of single color. So for this, I think that obviously we have the 2 sort of kind of imagery that we show here. I think this could work quite nicely. I think for this one here, I quite like the idea of potentially mixing the imagery with more of like the fluid shapes and stuff. So I think this could work quite well. This is quite nice. I like the way that the shapes are curving around the edges. It just gives a little bit more of fluidity. So I think that's a good one to include. I really like this sort of icon shape. Again, the single strokes here kind of match quite nicely with this kind of like font style. I think this is quite nice, and so is this. Yeah, so I think these 9 are going to be probably what I'll add into my mood board. So let's throw these in and just see visually if it works, if something's missing or anything like that. Quite like the movement that this logo has with the B, and the orange is actually really nice. So I think that's going to be sort of like my focus point for this mood board, and that's going to be like the pop of color that I think will hopefully also sort of emphasize the color palette that I think we should be potentially going down if we choose this mood board. Awesome. Okay, so I have the 9 I've picked for my first mood board, and I've put them into the grid. Now there's a bit of a clash of colors here, which I'm not too much of a fan of. Like I said, for the idea for this mood board, I think I want to go a little bit more minimal with my colors, try to just stick with sort of black and white, and then maybe just one pop of color. So I think the orange here will be the pop of color, and I want everything else to feel a little bit more muted. So for this image here in particular, I'm just going to double click in and then draw a square over the image. Drop this down to sort of a grey tone, and then in my opacity window, if I change the color, yeah, there we go, then we can have it, we can sort of grayscale this down a little bit. I quite like the idea of the movement of W, but the color for me is quite distracting. So if you find that that's the case, then obviously you're still more than able to create edits and stuff like this, just to hopefully help with creating the right visual that you like. So in terms of the colors here, I've got these squares down here at the bottom that I will use. So I think orange being the primary, I quite like this sort of just slightly off white, a bit more cream. I think that sort of blue could be quite a nice color here, and then black, and I don't think we need any other colors here. I think these could be the colors that we go with. And then for this image here, I just want to make a slight amendment here. I'm just gonna quickly grab my pen tool and kind of draw a stroke. I'm going to use the orange stroke. I'm just going to bump this up. Change this to multiply. Just to add a bit more of a feeling of the sort of idea that I had in my head. So, you know, I think if we look at like a marketing campaign and stuff like that, I think a nice fluid stroke that's just going throughout all of the imagery and typography and stuff like that, I think that would like bring together this whole branding style. Right, okay, so we have basically finished with the first mood board. I'm going to get going on the second mood board, and then I'm going to write the description for each of them and just sort of tidy up the file to get ready to show the client later on this week. So I'll finish everything up and then show you when I'm finished. Okay, cool. So this is the second mood board that I have just finished working on, and as you can see, it's a lot more bold and a lot more colourful, a lot more illustrative, and that's because I wanted to have two different sort of variations here. Obviously, I know that the client's still quite corporate, obviously being from a government organisation, but from the brief, they wanted things to feel a little bit more creative, a little bit more abstract. So for this mood board, I called it transformative, which again was one of the keywords from the brief, and the idea here is to just go a little bit more abstract for a bit more illustrative shapes and stuff like that. I found this really cool like interconnection of different shapes going together, and this immediately was one of the ideas that was popping in my head for how we can maybe create a CPG logo combined. So I actually prefer my second mood board over my first one. Both of them I really like, so I already have ideas for if the client chooses one over the other. And what I also do when I present, I always leave a third mood board or an additional mood board for feedback. So if the client decides that he likes certain elements from the first mood board but also some from the second, then I can then bring those in to create a third mood board to then once again get that signed off from the client, so that we still have a clear direction for where to go with the logo. So like I said, the presentation that I have with the client is in a few days, so I will try and record a little bit of that and let you know how it goes. This mood board is just the feeling of movement. So it's not just going to just be a static letter, static word like I've got here with like within the imagery and stuff like that. I want the lines and stuff to be flowing through the imagery to just like evoke more connection between each of the imagery and stuff like that, and just to try and like reinforce the unity and sort of synergy that you're trying to build between everything. Yeah, Moodboard 2 I call transformative, and I have a different vision in my head with this one, having a little bit more graphical focus here as well. So like in the bottom left hand corner where you've got these like abstract patterns and shapes and stuff.
See that symbol in the third one, the second one in the third row, there's always like that crossover and that touching already there. So yeah, I'm kind of I'm even saying now 99% the second one. I think there's only that element of the merging that might be interesting, that merging of movement, but yeah, I think this speaks to it.
Okay, so I just got off the call with the client and they loved both of the mood boards, but felt the second one was more in line with what they wanted, which is great. So I now have a direction for my next step, which is coming up with a logo concept. So if you guys want to see a video of me coming up with the actual logo idea, then just drop a comment below and I will continue on with this YouTube series. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful. If you want to grab the mood board template that I am currently using in this video, then like I said, the link is in my description. If you made it this far in the video, then comment orange, just so I'm aware of who makes it this far in my videos. And until then, I will catch you in the next one.